Enterprise Management 360.
Hello and welcome to another exciting episode of Tech Chats. Thank you so much for joining us today, and on today's episode we've got a very special interview with Peter Linkin from Cohesity. Now he's going to be walking us through this recent research around the public cloud, so let's go and find out what Peter's got to say.
So thank you so much for joining me today, Peter. I really appreciate you taking the time. So the main reason for this interview is to get your thoughts on the recent research that was done by Cohesity that revealed the expectation gap about the public cloud driven by the mass data fragmentation. So just got a couple of questions that I want to kind of pick your brains about on this. But just to give our viewers a bit of background as well, this was a global survey of 900 senior IT decision makers. And it shows that there's been this major expectation gap that exists between what the IT managers hope the public cloud would deliver for their organizations and what has actually transpired. So if we could just kind of get some clarification on this. At the public cloud's beginning, IT experts everywhere were excited to reap its many promised benefits, including, simplifying operations, increasing agility, reducing costs, and providing greater data insights, really. However, following its induction, Cohesity's survey showed that the majority felt it did not deliver on the promises. So what's been the main shortfalls in using the public cloud compared to what it claimed to offer?
Yeah, I think it is good to start there, actually, because I don't know about you, but I think that is a pretty surprising statistic, that came out of this survey. One of the reasons we wanted to do this survey, to be honest, was to sort of shine a light on the reality of what was really going on, in terms of the cloud adoption and the benefits that people were seeing. As you said, going into this, and I'm sure that's not uncommon, most companies are saying, well, cloud's a fantastic idea, I'll be able to do all these wonderful things. But I think we were interested in finding out, was that really true in practice? And so, to try and get to your question, I think that, first of all, this term of mass data fragmentation, which I know that we use a lot, I may as well just mention what that means, and it might help, give some context. So last November, we actually did a survey about this entire subject. What is mass data fragmentation? Does it really exist? Is it really a problem? And I'll cut that short, but essentially, what we found was, yes, it exists, and yes, it's a very serious problem. And there's another whole set of survey results there that you can take a look at sometime. But that was looking at the entire problem overall, between data centers and clouds and everything. And so this time around, we felt that it was actually quite important to take a second look at this because, as we've said, most people think, well, what's the problem here? I can solve my data center inefficiency and complexity and whatever by moving to the cloud. I know that's a very simplistic way of putting it, but essentially there is a lot of thinking in that direction.
Yeah, of course.
And hence this point that we wanted to sort of, throw out there, that actually, the reality is not that true. So the reasons, I think part of it would end up being shall we say, the process of moving to the cloud. In some cases, we found that it was actually mandated by senior management rather than something that IT had a lot of time to think through and plan. Let's go to the cloud. Which, again, not pointing too many fingers at business management, but, they may not know all of the intricacies of what it takes to do that, but they've heard it's a good idea. And so there's some top-down pressure, for one thing, on IT to go and get this cloud migration done, which means perhaps, not all of the governance and detailed planning, didn't have time for that. But it's this fragmentation idea, which is really what's caused this expectation gap. We found that, not to throw too many numbers around, but over 90% of the people that responded to this question about not getting the benefits said, no, we actually are not getting those benefits. And what's more, they were able to point to their fragmented data as being, a major cause, the major cause. So that's what really set this thing off in that, well, gosh, data is such a lifeblood of the business these days that if you really can't manage your data properly and get the value out of it, then that's a pretty serious point. So that was really what came into it. And part of it's planning. I think part of it was just literally the inefficiency of the current technology, the tools they use. People are using multiple different tools to manage their data in these clouds. They don't actually know necessarily where it all is. They don't have full visibility into it, which might lead, give you a compliance problem. And obviously there's a lot of inefficiency if you haven't got a sort of one-stop shopping way of being able to manage it in one place. So anyway, I think that was at least part of the reason.
Yeah, no, I think that is 100% right, because it's being promised this idea and then following up on it. It's many IT leaders. This is going to cause a lot of turbulent issues for them, because they're being rushed into moving to this public cloud. Senior management maybe are saying, this is a great idea, let's get this implemented. And then you kind of have those shortfalls. So what advice can you offer to IT teams that are kind of struggling to come up with effective strategies to use it?
Well, this is a serious point. Again, I don't want to at all be superficial about this, because I realize that companies have budgets and organizations and senior management expectations, as we've said. So I don't want to sort of imagine we can wave a wand over this, but at the very least, I mean, one of the major reasons why we wanted to do this survey and get these results out was to honestly educate these organizations as to what could be really going on. It looked to us from the survey like it was pretty prevalent, pretty widespread, and pretty serious. We had some statistics in here, sort of like IT teams were spending on average something like 19 weeks, like 5 months of a year, just managing their data and apps in these clouds, not the data center, right? Just the clouds. So you can imagine that, and I think they were even implying it was going to go up to something like 6 months, of the year, so half of the working year, just to manage, the data and apps in the cloud. So if it's that serious, I imagine, frankly, it's also a business level question, not just an IT, excuse me, a technical question. So again, what I'm trying to give you the background on that is that obviously inside these companies, I think there has to be some dialogue about the reality between the business and the IT folks. And I suppose I would say we would hope to think that this would help to educate them. So I would say educate yourselves and the teams that actually this is a problem. It's real. This data fragmentation thing is not just imaginary. It's real. So there's some education to be done there, and it's quite serious. So and look into it. I would probably then say evaluate your current situation, because the survey seemed to imply that these companies had 3, 4, 5, 6, different products just to manage their data in the cloud. So evaluate what you're currently using for that, and just ask yourself, is that the most efficient way you could do it? So I think that would be take an audit, if you like, right, of where is my data, how am I managing it, where is it, how many people are required to manage it, etc. And that might give you a baseline. And obviously, I think something else to say from our side anyway is that it is possible these days to actually approach this problem a different way without going too far down the Cohesity route here. But there are companies like ourselves that have actually approached this from a completely different way. So think about technologies that are software defined rather than all this hardware and componentry that you're currently using. So everything's in one place, everything's in software, everything can be managed easily and scalably. So, like the Google-like, modern approach, as it were, to managing your data in these clouds. And, such solutions now exist, which maybe wasn't the case, a few years ago. And again, I hope I'm not, I need to make a couple of disclaimers here. We're not pointing the fingers at, the customers. I mean, frankly, there weren't many choices, right? They had put a lot of this stuff in place. Over time, organically. And so no wonder they're in this situation. So we're not sort of blaming them, but it's good to know that there are actually now other ways of doing this, kind of more software defined and web scale way of doing things.
Yeah.
Did that answer your question? Or?
Yeah, no, I think that's perfect. And I think you're 100% right in the sense of having options available are now there, whereas in the past they might not have been. And when this adoption first happened, they weren't necessarily an option. But if we kind of take that approach and look towards the future, if public cloud does continue and become more widespread, which I'm sure it will, how do you see this shaping IT operations in the future?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I mean, that probably is a connected question here, because without trying to sound too doom and gloom, I mean, I'm hoping that folks, when they read the survey, will realize that you probably have to do something about this. It's unlikely that with your current setup, if it's like the ones that we saw in the survey, that you'll be able to, honestly manage the growth, right? We all know that the growth rates of data in companies and the scale that it's going to need, and the, dispersal across all of these different locations, right? There's not just 3 or 4 or 5 public clouds. It could be in different data centers, in different storage and so on. So, you really have got to get your arms around that data one way or another. So, doing something, I think, is kind of important. But I think not to trivialize your point, but I mean, honestly, I think one of the ways that I would say that you could arm yourself better for the future is to arrange things in such a way that it shouldn't matter, where your data is, whether it's in the cloud or whether it's in data centers or wherever. I personally, honestly, believe it's going to be a hybrid world in the future. I think, of course, clouds are growing, at an enormous rate, but I still feel like, the data center is probably not disappearing anytime soon. There's always reasons why you still need to have data that is not in the cloud. So let's say that, in my belief anyway, is that it's going to be a hybrid world. The smart approach would be, I think, to arrange things so that you wouldn't really care, where your data is. In other words, have one solution that can actually look at it and manage it no matter where it is, and move it, change your mind in the future, right? Today we're in this cloud, tomorrow we might want to move it to another cloud, or for some reason we want to bring it back to the data center, vice versa. I think that's the sort of nirvana that most IT folks would say would be great. And again, without going too far down our own commercial here, that's essentially what the product was designed to do, is to give people this choice of no matter where it is, we can still manage it from one UI, from one point.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think it's that seems like the best way going forward, making life a lot easier for everyone involved. So thank you so much for your insight today, Peter, and walking us through the survey. It was really good talking to you.
Okay, well, fair enough. I enjoyed it. Thanks for your time.
Right, that's another episode of Tech Chat in the Bag. Thank you for joining us, and thank you to Peter for giving us insight on the survey there. Make sure you check out below to find out some more information on the research. If you want to see more EM360 content, make sure you go onto LinkedIn and Twitter, and also go onto the website, which is em360tech.com. Now also, if you're interested in generating leads for your business, we can help generate your content across North America, APAC, and Europe, and then we can generate SQLs and MQLs right back to you. In next week's episode of Tech Chat, we are going to Egg London, which is an AI event. We've got lots of exciting interviews coming up, so I'm really excited to get that started. So we'll see you next week for Egg London.